And then underneath it has these different scenes that I expect you guys to look over. Ideally, I would be able to like cover all of these scenes with you in class. Am I going to be able to cover every single one of them? I don't know. I'm just going to do what I can and play it by ear. So it may be that you've got to review some of these on your own at home, but the ultimate goal is to get to a paper topic and to be able to defend your claim, your thesis, with textual evidence. And these are, I think, some of the key scenes that would help you with all that good stuff, okay? So we've got the glass menagerie that we want to discuss in detail. Y'all did take your quiz last week. Y'all did better on the glass menagerie than you did on the Rocket Boys stuff, probably because it's been a while since you've read Rocket Boys, okay? And if you haven't gotten your score on that yet, then go in through Canvas and see how you did. If you got any questions, then just send them out to me. You know, we don't have the quiz in front of us and we can't go over it like we typically would. I will cover some of the responses when I discuss Glass Menagerie, so just kind of, you know, be listening for that, all right? So y'all had a chance to watch the video on Tennessee Williams, the first 30 minutes at least. Yes, ma'am. Tanaya, right?
Yes, ma'am. It says mine is missing, but I took the quiz.
Okay, you know what? I had people who are enrolled in 2 different courses on Canvas, so you're probably one of those that, like, on one of my courses it shows that you didn't submit, but on another one it shows that you did. So if you
had P2 and P3.
yeah, so you're probably fine. If you go into grades on Canvas, it will hopefully show up with the one that was actually scored. And if not, then I can tell you what you made if you like reach out to me, okay? So it's not showing you anything? Okay. Send me an email or a text to remind me when I have a second to take a look at it, okay? And it may not be till tonight, okay? All right. But there were like maybe a dozen kids that seemed to happen to, so I don't want you to panic about it, okay? All right, did y'all watch the video on Tennessee Williams? So let's see. Caroline, right?
Yeah.
Caroline, tell me something that like struck you as you were watching that video, something that was especially interesting. It was probably a while ago that you watched it, so.
I don't know.
Tell me about something that's tied to the play. Because there's a lot that was in that video that explains, like, the Glass Menagerie itself.
Like his relationship with his sister.
Yeah, see, to me, that's the most interesting thing. I mean, the relationship with Rose and the fact that, I want to say he said something like he had enough of her, you know, she was moody, seriously moody, probably bipolar, okay? And he looks at her one time and says, I don't want to see your ugly face again. And what does she do, y'all?
She gets a knife.
She takes a carving knife after her dad, like the very next day. Now, her dad's not a nice guy, okay? But still. So she becomes institutionalized. That means she's put into an asylum, right? And then she's lobotomized. Did you guys look up what that means?
Part of her brain.
Yes, it's crazy. They go in and they actually like scrape out part of the brain, and it's part of the brain that, like, I want to say controls memory, and so it really changes who you are. In a way, it improves the mood swings, okay? But of course the downside is that you're no longer the person you once were. So when asked about how his sister Rose was, Tennessee responded, well, she's tranquil, meaning she's calm. Which, if you're a family trying to like manage someone's behavior, I suppose that's convenient, but you are not who you once were. So he has this tremendous guilt over possibly precipitating that, right? Possibly causing that, and then moving on with his life when she's kind of stuck in the past. We see that guilt poured into the Glass Menagerie, okay? Because in the end of the story, what does Tom do? He leaves. So a possible paper topic that you can think about is looking at Tom and saying, okay, does Tom leave because he absolutely just has to get out in order to survive? I mean, he says things like, I would rather someone bash my head in than get up and go to work in the morning. Sometimes I wake up and I think how lucky dead people are. I mean, that's his individual hell. That was one of the questions on your quiz, by the way, right? Each one of these characters lives this life that is their own individual hell. And Tom's is that he's stuck.
Stuck in the past.
Well, I think Amanda's stuck in the past, right?
Yeah,
Tom is stuck in his present
He just don't.
that he, and in that job that he just, I mean, it's miserable. It's miserable.
Well, he makes himself miserable because he does already have a negative outlook on what's going on.
Yeah.
In his life. So he doesn't really take the time to be like, okay, I'm lucky to be alive. I'm lucky to have.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, this is set during the Depression. And y'all, during the 1930s, the Depression, I mean, you've got people who are out of work, who are living on the streets, who can't feed their families. So, in a way, when his mom says, you know, you've got work, you got to go and you got to support this family, I mean, you could look at him having work as a blessing, but he doesn't view it that way. And that's a good possible paper topic too, Gracie, right? Because you could look at Tom and you could say, okay, he's got a negative outlook, but what is it that makes him that way? Like, is it his mother's overbearing, you know, love? Because, I mean, she's coming from a place of love, but her love is pretty toxic. Or is it that he looks at that big picture of his father that's hanging on the wall and hanging over them like a cloud and thinks, I'm a lot like that man. I don't want to be him, but I'm afraid I'm gonna be, right? I mean, what is it that causes him to have that negativity?
He doesn't really have a lot of support.
No,
if that
he
makes
doesn't.
any sense. Like his mom is overbearing and she's like so much out of him, but there's really no way for him to be supported since she's freaking out all the time.
And she never really gives him credit either. Did y'all notice that? Like, she always says that he's selfish, yet he's the one paying the bills. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at the actual beginning. And if you'll follow along, except for Bella, 'cause she's videotaping me. Sorry, Bella. All right. Scene 1 begins with, and if you have a highlighter handy, you want to mark this, okay? The Wingfield apartment is in the rear of the building, one of those vast hive-like conglomerations of cellular living units that flower as woody growths in overcrowded urban centers of lower middle class population, okay? Wow, there's like 5 vocabulary words in that one sentence, right? So here's the thing. This is one tiny, cramped apartment where the people are all living in there on top of each other and they're desperate. No one's happy. Tom's hell is that he's trapped. By the way, one of those other questions on that quiz was he sees that magician whose best trick is to be able to like get out of the coffin without removing a nail. Pretty clear what the coffin is. What's the coffin for Tom?
It's not allowed.
I mean, that's his life. That's the job. That's the family. That's the trap that he's living in. What are those nails?
His mom, his mom.
Yeah, explain. He doesn't want to remove the nail.
He doesn't want to take his family out of his life, but he would still like to be free.
Well, I'm not even going to say he don't want to take the family out of the life. He wants to get out without hurting them.
Yes, that's what I mean.
And that's the dilemma. because he is their sole means of what? Survival. So Jim is a hope to Tom because, man, if Jim and Laura, and you think it's going to work out when you read that scene and they're getting along and you're like,
And then the kids.
this is going to be okay, it's going to turn out okay, it's going to be good, and then it's just not, it's not good, it's not good at all. You know, Jim could be that replacement. If Jim and Laura worked out, Laura and Amanda would be supported for the rest of their lives. Tom could get the hell out of there. Okay? Not the way it works though, right? Okay, so by telling us at the very beginning that this is just one little apartment in a hive of apartments, reminds us that this is just one family story. Now, it's set in the Great Depression, the 1930s, okay? People are struggling. So this one story about this one family is just representative of all those stories and families that are out there that, you know, we'll never hear about. So everybody's struggling. Okay? All right, go to the second paragraph. The apartment faces an alley and is entered by a fire escape. The structure, whose name is a touch of accidental poetic truth, for all those huge buildings are always burning with slow, implacable fires of human desperation. So guys, there are a couple of things that are real clear, or should be. It's almost like Tennessee Williams is slapping us across the face with these symbols. I mean, fire escape. If they need a break from each other, where do they go? They go to the fire escape, right? Tom especially goes and sits out on the fire escape. It's the escape from their reality, right? Every one of the characters does have an escape. Tom, the fire escape itself, but what does he do every night? Goes to the movies. Some of you guys wrote in the quiz that he says he goes to the movies, but doesn't really. I think he really does go to the movies. He's someone who wants action and can't have it, and so the next best thing is to go and watch that action on a screen. Okay, that's an escape for him. Laura's escape, I think, is pretty obvious. The glass. Also, like the music that plays on the Victrola is another way that she escapes. But Laura, if you haven't figured out, and again, it's another one of those symbols that kind of whops us across the face. I mean, she is fragile. She has to be handled with care. In other words, she is like what? Glass. Which leads us to another question. Probably the biggest question. At the end of the play, when Jim, you know, when they break that unicorn and that horn falls off, does that mean that she is going to be okay because she's going from being a unicorn that doesn't fit in to a horse like all the others? Is she going to have some kind of normalcy in her life? Or does that mean that she's broken? She's left shattered? It's a great paper topic because you can argue really either way. You know? Okay? Her individual hell, by the way, is not just her physical limitation. Like, you know, she's crippled physically, but what truly cripples her?
Her inferiority.
Yeah, like she has this inferiority complex. She is cripplingly shy. Do you remember when she's talking to Jim and they're talking about back in high school when she would enter the auditorium for choir? That's the class they had together. She said, I always got there late. And what does she remember most about entering that classroom?
Her loud brace.
Yes, her brace on her leg. She said it clumped so loudly. And Jim says,
I really didn't.
I didn't hear it. Never heard it. So it reminds us that people who are as shy as Laura is, they tend to exaggerate things in their mind. And even entering a room full of people that they don't know can be like a painful experience. So her physical limitation is just, to me, symbolic of like really what's going on with her emotionally. She's emotionally limited, right? Her individual hell also, I think, comes from the fact that she's like the mediator between her brother, whom she loves, and her mother, whom she loves. What do I mean by mediator? What is a mediator? That's a good vocabulary word too.
She's kind of what they have in common, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, like
both
they-
love each other. They
She
both
has
love
to
her.
be the peacemaker. And when they stop talking to each other, like she literally has to talk for each other to them. I mean, how difficult would that be? They do not handle her with care. When they start fighting, who gets hurt? She does. And it's very literal when things like, you know, her glass falls off the shelf and breaks due to some kind of argument that they've had with each other. Okay? All right, he goes on to say, third paragraph, the scene is memory, it's therefore non-realistic. So this is a memory play, and he says unapologetically that this event or these events are colored by my perception. It's not realism. Okay? All right, he goes on at the very beginning. And this is where he starts talking, y'all. He says, yes, I have tricks in my pocket. I have things up my sleeve. But I am the opposite of a stage magician. He gives you illusion that has the appearance of truth. I give you truth in the pleasant disguise of illusion. To begin with, I turn back time. I reverse it to that quaint period, the 30s, the Depression. When the huge middle class of America was matriculating in a school for the blind. And he talks about the dissolving economy. He goes on to talk about the play being memory. He's the narrator and a character. He also talks about Jim. Hang on.
Shifts, and so having to eat in classrooms. Jackets, if you are going to the cafeteria to pick up a lunch, we ask that you use both of the center sets of stairs. There shouldn't be anyone going upstairs to the second or third floors. Those are all lunch floors, so we want you to come down those stairs. We want you to wash your hands first. Jackets, we can put a limited number of people in the cafeteria itself. A limited number of people can go to the library, the courtyard next to the library, the Ravenna courtyard, which is on the opposite side of the cafeteria, and then outside. But everyone must be 6 feet apart. Does not matter where you sit. It doesn't matter if you're standing. People have to be 6 feet apart. Jackets, if you can't make this work, we will put you back in classrooms, and you're not going to be able to get any free time where you can do a little more socializing like I know you want to do at school. So 6 feet apart, observe what we've been telling you all in the mornings about Jack's Landing. And then when the bell rings, instead of going to your 4th period class, if you're on the first lunch shift, you go straight to lunch. Thank you.
Okay, 2 more points real quick before the bell rings. What does Amanda escape to? What's she constantly thinking about?
Her past.
Her past. Good. She can't deal with her reality. And then Jim, who comes in, he introduces that character. He says he represents reality, the real world, actually walking into their apartment, but he is also their home. Okay? I'll cut here.